Amid the festive Christmas atmosphere, an elderly woman who has lived alone for years sits in her quiet, chilly house where no one ever visits. Suddenly, 3 knocks at the door make her freeze. Outside stand a young woman and her little daughter, holding a box of cookies and smiling brightly. She intends to send them away, but when she sees the child shiver from the cold, she opens the door and lets them in. She has no idea that these 2 visitors will soon change her entire life. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Every house on Willow Creek Road glowed warm on Christmas Eve, every single one, except the last. Eleanor Walker sat motionless in her armchair, a statue carved from loneliness and regret. The only light in her living room came from the dying embers in the old stone fireplace, casting shadows that danced across walls that hadn't heard laughter in 15 years. Outside, the town of Maple Ridge, Maine, celebrated. Church bells rang from St. Michael's on the hill, their clear notes carrying through the cold December air. Children's voices rose in excitement, shrieking, laughing, calling to each other as they built snowmen and threw snowballs under the glow of streetlights wrapped in garland. The smell of cinnamon rolls and fresh-baked pies drifted from neighboring houses, mixing with the sharp scent of pine from Christmas trees visible through lit windows. Inside Eleanor's house, there was only silence. She was 74 years old, white-haired, thin as a winter branch. Her skin had that papery quality that came with age, her hands spotted and veined. Those hands shook slightly as she lifted a teacup to her lips, a tremor that had started a few years back and gotten worse with each passing season. The tea had gone cold an hour ago, maybe 2. Time had a way of slipping past when you lived alone, but Eleanor drank it anyway, grimacing at the bitter taste. "Getting worse at this, aren't we, Henry?" she muttered to the empty room. Her voice sounded strange in the silence, thin, unused. She talked to herself more often these days. Sometimes she'd catch herself mid-sentence and stop, embarrassed even though no one was there to hear. Her eyes drifted to the mantel above the fireplace. Among the accumulated dust sat a single picture frame, face down on the dark wood. She'd turned it over 15 years ago, the day after the funeral, the day before her son left, and hadn't touched it since. The frame had gathered so much dust that you could write your name in it. Eleanor had noticed it last week while cleaning. Her hand had reached for it, fingers hovering an inch above the frame. Then she'd pulled back and cleaned around it instead. "Talking to ghosts again," she said now, setting the teacup down with a soft click. "That's what happens when you're alone too long. You start having conversations with people who aren't there." But even as she said it, she was already reaching for the teapot, pouring a second cup, setting it on the other side of the small table, in the spot where someone else might sit. She stared at the second cup for a long moment. Then, almost violently, she pushed it away with 2 fingers, sliding it to the far edge of the table. "Ridiculous," she whispered. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked, each second distinct, echoing in the empty house. Tick, 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 like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop, measuring out a life she'd stopped living years ago. The fire crackled, a log splitting and sending up a small shower of sparks. Eleanor watched them die against the blackened bricks of the fireplace. Outside, she could hear the carolers now. They came every year, a group from the church moving from house to house down Willow Creek Road. Their voices grew louder as they approached, harmony rising and falling in the night air. "Joy to the world, the Lord is come." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, though the room wasn't particularly cold. The cardigan was old, pilled at the elbows. The color faded from navy to a dull gray. She'd bought it 20 years ago. Henry had said it brought out her eyes. She hadn't bought new clothes since he died. The carolers' voices swelled as they reached her front gate. Eleanor could picture them, bundled in scarves and mittens, holding candles in paper cups, their breath fogging in the cold. They paused. She held her breath. Then the singing moved on, growing fainter as they continued down the street to the next house. They used to stop at her house. The first few years after Henry died, they'd stop. They'd sing. They'd wait, hoping she might come out, might open the door, might join them. But she never did. And eventually, they stopped trying. Eleanor released her breath slowly. She told herself she was relieved. She didn't want visitors, didn't want forced cheer, didn't want well-meaning neighbors asking how she was doing with that particular tone of voice that said they already knew the answer. The sign in her front yard made that clear enough. No visitors. She'd put it up 7 years ago. Hand-painted, the letters uneven. It leaned to one side now, the post rotting in the ground, but the message was still legible. People had gotten the hint. She told herself she preferred it this way. No one to worry about. No one to disappoint. No one to lose. No one to hurt. But on nights like this, when the whole world seemed wrapped in warmth and light, when every window glowed yellow and families gathered around tables laden with food, when laughter spilled out into the street and children squealed with delight over gifts, the silence in her house felt less like peace and more like punishment. Eleanor set down her teacup. Her hand trembled more than usual, and she clasped both hands together in her lap to stop the shaking. The knuckles were swollen with arthritis, the joints aching in the cold. "One more Christmas," she whispered to the empty room. Just one more. She didn't know what she meant by that. She wasn't planning anything drastic. She just felt deep in her bones that she couldn't do this many more times. Couldn't sit alone in this dark house many more Christmases listening to other people celebrate while she counted the hours until the holiday passed. She wasn't even sure she'd said it out loud. The fire was dying now. She should add another log, but that felt like too much effort, like admitting she'd be awake for hours yet, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling in her bedroom upstairs. Better to let it die. Better to go to bed. Better to pull the covers over her head and wait for December 26th, when the world would go back to normal and she could stop feeling quite so alone. Eleanor pushed herself up from the armchair. Her knees protested. Everything hurt more these days. She was getting old and brittle and worn down. She picked up both teacups, her own and the untouched second one, and carried them to the kitchen. The linoleum floor was cold even through her slippers. She dumped both cups in the sink without washing them. That could wait until morning. She turned off the kitchen light and made her way back to the living room. She'd bank the fire, check the locks, turn off the lights, go upstairs. Another Christmas Eve survived. She was reaching for the fireplace poker when she heard it. 3 knocks, soft but distinct, deliberate. Eleanor froze, her hand suspended in midair. The sound had come from the front door. She turned slowly, staring at the dark wood as if it had betrayed her. Must be the wind, she thought, or a branch from the oak tree scraping the porch. But there were no branches close enough to reach the door. She'd had them all trimmed back years ago, after one had broken a window during a storm. The knocking came again. 3 taps, louder this time, more insistent. Eleanor's heart began to beat faster, a quick flutter in her chest that made her dizzy. Her hand went to her throat. "Who's there?" Her voice came out sharp, defensive, angry even. A pause. Then a woman's voice, young and uncertain, filtered through the door. "Mrs. Walker, I'm so sorry to bother you this late. My name is Grace Miller. I just moved to the neighborhood and—" "I don't want any visitors," Eleanor called out, her voice louder than she'd intended. "There's a sign. Can't you read?" Another pause. Eleanor could hear whispered voices, more than one person. "I know, ma'am. I saw the sign. I'm really sorry. We brought some cookies for the neighbors, and you're the last house on the road, and we didn't want to leave anyone out. We'll just leave them on the porch if—" "I don't want your cookies." But even as Eleanor said it, even as the words came out harsh and unwelcoming, she found herself moving toward the door. Not to open it, just to see, just to look at whoever was standing on her porch at 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve, trying to give her something she didn't deserve. She reached the door and pressed her palm flat against the wood. It was cold. On the other side, she could hear the shuffle of feet, the murmur of voices, a child's voice, high and clear. "Maybe she didn't hear us, Mama." Eleanor's breath caught. A child. They'd brought a child out in this weather, in the cold, in the dark, to knock on a stranger's door, to knock on her door, where the sign clearly said no visitors, where the lights were always off, where everyone in Maple Ridge knew the old widow didn't want company. What kind of mother brought a child? Eleanor unlocked the deadbolt with shaking fingers. She turned the doorknob. She opened the door, but only a crack, just enough to see out. Snow swirled in the yellow circle of the porch light, a light she rarely turned on, but which had switched on automatically with the outdoor timer she'd never bothered to disconnect. A young black woman stood on the porch steps, maybe 32 years old, wearing a thin jacket that was clearly not warm enough for a Maine winter. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her smile was nervous, apologetic. Beside her, clutching the woman's hand, was a little girl, 7 years old, maybe 8. She wore a pink winter coat and matching mittens, but her coat was unzipped and her hat was askew. She held a red tin box in both hands, the kind you could buy at the dollar store, decorated with a gold ribbon. The girl looked up at Eleanor with wide eyes. Her breath came out in small white puffs. "Hello," the child said softly. Eleanor stared at them. The cold air bit at her face, at her hands. Snow was blowing onto her porch, onto the welcome mat that said welcome, even though she'd never welcomed anyone. "I'm Grace Miller," the woman said again, speaking quickly like she was afraid Eleanor would slam the door any second. "We just moved into the brick house with the green door at the start of the road. The Robinsons' old place? This is my daughter, Lily. We've been bringing cookies to all the neighbors tonight, trying to introduce ourselves and, well, you're the last house. We didn't want to skip anyone." Eleanor opened her mouth. She wanted to say, "Go away." She wanted to say, "I don't need your pity." She wanted to close the door and pretend this never happened. But Lily shivered, just a small tremor that ran through her thin shoulders. Her mittened hands gripped the tin box tighter, and her lips, Eleanor noticed, were pale from the cold. "It's 9 o'clock at night," Eleanor heard herself say. Her voice was harsh, accusing. "You shouldn't have a child out in this weather. It's freezing. It's dangerous." Grace's smile faltered. "I know. I work late shifts at the hospital. This was the only time we could do it. And I wanted Lily to—" She paused, then tried again. "I wanted her to see what it's like to give something to people, to be part of a community. I'm sorry, we'll go. We'll just leave the cookies." "You'll freeze before you get back home," Eleanor snapped. Grace blinked. "We'll be fine. It's not that far. Get inside." "What?" "I said get inside." Eleanor stepped back, opening the door wider. "Before that child catches pneumonia. Come in, just for a minute. Warm up before you walk back." Grace stared at her, clearly shocked. "We don't want to impose." "You're already here, aren't you?" Eleanor gestured impatiently. "You already knocked. You already woke me up. You might as well come in before you both turn into icicles on my porch." Grace looked down at Lily, who was watching Eleanor with intense curiosity. The girl didn't look scared. She looked interested. "Okay," Grace said slowly. "Just for a minute. Lily, honey, wipe your feet." They stepped inside. Eleanor closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold and the snow and the sounds of distant Christmas celebrations. The house seemed to contract around the three of them, two strangers and a woman who'd forgotten how to have guests. Grace and Lily stood just inside the doorway, uncertain. They were dripping melted snow onto Eleanor's hardwood floor, leaving wet footprints on wood that had been polished to a shine through sheer boredom and too much time alone. Eleanor looked at the puddles forming around their boots and felt a flash of irritation. Then she looked at Lily's pink coat, soaked dark at the shoulders where snow had accumulated, and the irritation faded into something else, something uncomfortably like guilt. "Take off your coats," Eleanor said abruptly, "and your boots. You're tracking snow everywhere." "Oh, we're not staying," Grace began. "I know, but you're not walking back out there for at least 10 minutes. Take them off." There was something in Eleanor's tone, not kindness exactly, but a kind of gruff authority that made Grace obey. She helped Lily out of her pink coat, hanging it on the coat rack by the door. The girl's boots were light-up sneakers, Eleanor noticed. They flashed red and blue when she walked. Lily looked around the house with wide eyes, taking it all in. Eleanor tried to see her home through a child's perspective. It was clean, obsessively so. Every surface dusted, every corner swept, but it was dark. The curtains were drawn. The furniture was old-fashioned, heavy, and dark wood. There were no pictures on the walls, no decorations, no signs that anyone actually lived here. The dying fire in the fireplace provided the only warmth, casting long shadows across the room. "Your house is so quiet," Lily whispered, her voice small in the silence. "Like even the snow is listening." Eleanor turned sharply to look at the girl. That was an odd thing for a 7-year-old to say, almost poetic. "It's quiet because I live alone," Eleanor said flatly. "And I like it that way." Lily nodded seriously, as if Eleanor had said something profound. "Sometimes quiet is good. Mama says I'm too loud sometimes." Despite herself, Eleanor felt the corner of her mouth twitch, almost a smile. She crushed it immediately. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the sofa near the fireplace. "I'll make tea." "Oh, you really don't have to." Grace started again. I'm making it. Eleanor turned and walked to the kitchen before Grace could protest further. Once there, hidden from view, she pressed both palms flat on the counter and took a deep breath. "What are you doing?" she asked herself. "Why did you let them in?" But she already knew the answer. She'd seen Lily shivering. She'd heard the child's voice, and some part of her, some part she'd thought was dead 15 years ago, couldn't send a little girl back out into the cold. She filled the kettle with trembling hands, set it on the stove, turned on the burner. How long had it been since she'd made tea for someone else? Since she'd had a guest in this house? Dr. Morrison had stopped by about 6 months ago, the town's elderly doctor doing welfare checks on his older patients. She'd answered the door, but hadn't let him in. Before that, nothing. No one. Eleanor found cups in the cabinet. They were mismatched, one with a chip in the rim, one with a faded floral pattern, one plain white. She'd broken her good tea set years ago, thrown it against the wall in a fit of rage and grief the week after Daniel left. She'd cleaned up the pieces, swept them into the trash, and never replaced them. What was the point of a tea set when you lived alone? She heard voices from the living room, Grace talking to Lily in low tones, the child's higher voice responding. Eleanor strained to hear what they were saying, then felt foolish for caring. The kettle whistled. Eleanor poured hot water over tea bags, regular black tea, nothing fancy, and carried the cups out on a tray. When she entered the living room, she found Grace and Lily sitting side by side on the sofa. They'd clearly been whispering, but stopped when Eleanor appeared. Eleanor set the tray on the coffee table, a heavy oak piece that Henry had built with his own hands 40 years ago. She'd kept it polished all these years, though she couldn't have said why. "Sugar?" she asked, her voice coming out more brusque than intended. "Just plain is fine," Grace said softly. "Thank you." Eleanor poured, her hands still shaking. A little tea sloshed onto the tray. She cursed under her breath. "I'm sorry," Grace said quickly. "We really didn't mean to intrude." "Stop apologizing." Eleanor handed her a cup. "You're here. Drink your tea." She turned to Lily, holding out the plain white cup. "You drink tea?" "Yes, ma'am. Mama lets me have it sometimes." "It's hot. Don't burn yourself." "I won't." Eleanor sat in her armchair across from them, her own cup warming her cold hands. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. It should have been awkward. It was awkward, but there was something else underneath the awkwardness. Something Eleanor couldn't quite name. Presence. That was it. For the first time in 15 years, there was presence in this house. Living, breathing people who weren't ghosts or memories. "I should introduce us properly," Grace said, breaking the silence. "I'm Grace Miller. This is my daughter, Lily. We just moved here from Boston about 2 weeks ago." Eleanor nodded stiffly. "Eleanor Walker." "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Walker." "Why Maple Ridge?" The question came out before Eleanor could stop it. "Why leave Boston for a little town in Maine?" Grace smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I wanted Lily to grow up somewhere quieter, safer, somewhere with—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Somewhere with neighbors who know each other. Community. Boston it was too much, too busy, too impersonal." Eleanor studied her. There was more to the story. She could hear it in the pauses, in the careful word choice. But she didn't pry. "What do you do?" she asked instead. "I'm a nurse. Emergency room at Maple Ridge General Hospital. I work late shifts mostly, 3 to midnight. That's why we're out so late tonight. I just got off work." "And you brought your daughter with you?" Grace's cheeks colored slightly. "I know it's not ideal, but I wanted—" She stopped, started again. "Tonight's Christmas Eve. I wanted to do something special with her, even if it was just bringing cookies to neighbors. I wanted her to see what it looks like to give, to be part of something." Eleanor looked at Lily. The girl was holding her teacup carefully in both small hands, looking around the room with those curious eyes. "Don't you have a Christmas tree, Mrs. Walker?" Lily asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. "No," Eleanor said shortly. "Why not?" "Lily," Grace said gently. "It's okay. Not everyone celebrates the same way." But Lily was still looking at Eleanor, waiting for an answer. "I don't need a tree," Eleanor said. Her voice came out harder than she meant it to. "I don't need decorations. There's no one here to see them anyway." "But you're here," Lily said simply. Eleanor blinked. The child's logic was so straightforward, it was disarming. "I don't celebrate Christmas anymore," Eleanor said finally. "Haven't in years." Because you're alone? Lily asked. Lily, Grace said, horrified. That's not polite. It's fine. Eleanor waved a hand dismissively. She looked at Lily, really looked at her. The girl wasn't being cruel. She was just curious, direct in the way only children could be. Yes, Eleanor said, because I'm alone. Lily nodded, processing this. Then she said, we're alone too, it's just me and Mama, but we still do Christmas stuff. Lily, Grace said softly, that's different. Why? Because there's two of us? Lily looked at her mother, then at Eleanor. You don't have to be a lot of people to celebrate. You just have to want to. Eleanor felt something twist in her chest, a sharp pain like touching a bruise. She set down her teacup, changed the subject. You said you brought cookies. Grace seemed relieved at the shift in conversation. She reached for the red tin that Lily had set on the coffee table. We did. They're just sugar cookies. Nothing fancy. Lily decorated them. I used lots of frosting, Lily announced proudly. Mama said I used too much, but I think cookies can't have too much frosting. Grace opened the tin. Inside were cookies in various shapes, stars, trees, bells, all covered in thick layers of colorful frosting and sprinkles. I made the star ones, Lily said, pointing. See, the green star is for you, Mrs. Walker. Green because, I don't know, I just thought you might like green. Eleanor looked at the green star. The frosting was lumpy and uneven. Sprinkles were piled on so thick they were falling off. It was the most beautiful cookie she'd ever seen. Thank you, she said quietly. That's very kind. Lily beamed. They sat in silence for another moment, drinking their tea. Eleanor couldn't remember the last time she'd had a conversation that lasted this long. Grace was looking around the room now, her eyes taking in the details. Eleanor saw her notice the cleanliness, the lack of photographs, the way everything seemed frozen in time. And then Grace's gaze landed on something across the room. Her expression shifted, softened. Eleanor followed her gaze and felt her stomach drop. Grace was looking at the potted plant on the windowsill. It was a fake plant, a cheap plastic thing Eleanor had bought decades ago to fill empty space. It sat in a small ceramic pot on the sill, gathering dust. The leaves were faded, some of them bent at unnatural angles. It was sad, neglected, just like everything else in this house. But before Eleanor could say anything, Lily had slipped off the sofa and was walking toward it. Lily, honey, come sit down, Grace said. But Lily wasn't listening. She was standing in front of the plant, studying it with that intense focus children sometimes have. What are you doing? Eleanor asked, her voice sharper than intended. Lily didn't answer. Instead, she reached up and touched one of the plastic leaves. Then she did something that made Eleanor's breath catch. The girl reached up to her head and untied the pink ribbon from her braid. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders. Carefully, deliberately, she tied the ribbon around one of the stems of the plant, making a little bow. There, Lily said, stepping back. Now your house has something happy in it. Eleanor stared at the pink ribbon. It was cheap, the kind you could buy 10 for $1 at any store. The color was bright, almost garish against the dull plastic green of the plant. In the dim, colorless room, it stood out like a flame. Grace stood quickly. Lily, you didn't have to do that. That's your favorite ribbon. I wanted to, Lily said simply. Mrs. Walker needs it more than I do. Eleanor tried to speak, couldn't. Her throat had closed up. She wanted to tell the girl to take it back, to untie it, to leave things the way they were, but no words came out. Grace looked at Eleanor, uncertain. I'm sorry. If you don't want it there, I can... It's fine, Eleanor managed. Her voice sounded strange, tight. Leave it. Lily smiled, a bright, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. Eleanor turned away, pretending to tend the fire. She didn't want them to see her face, didn't want them to see whatever expression she was wearing, because something inside her had just cracked, just a little, like ice beginning to thaw. Eleanor woke the next morning, Christmas morning, to sunlight streaming through a gap in her bedroom curtains. She'd forgotten to close them all the way. She was usually so careful about that, keeping out every bit of light, maintaining the darkness she'd wrapped around herself like armor. But last night, after Grace and Lily left, she'd been distracted. The light hit her face, warm and insistent. For a moment she lay still, disoriented. Then memory rushed back. The knock on the door, the woman and the little girl, the tea, the cookies, the pink ribbon. Eleanor sat up slowly, her back stiff and protesting. She was getting too old to sleep in a bed this hard, but she'd never bothered to replace the mattress. Who would she replace it for? She went through her morning routine mechanically. Bathroom, face washing, teeth brushing. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw an old woman looking back, gray hair in disarray, deep lines around her mouth and eyes, skin papery and pale. When had she gotten so old? She dressed in her usual clothes, simple pants and a sweater, and made her way downstairs. The house was silent, as always, but the silence felt different today. Less comfortable, more empty. Eleanor made coffee, ate a piece of toast standing at the kitchen counter, washed her single plate and cup. Then she found herself drifting toward the living room. The fire had gone out completely overnight. She'd need to clean it out, lay new kindling. But that wasn't what drew her. Sunlight was streaming through the window now, cutting through the gap in the curtains. It illuminated the fake plant on the sill, and the pink ribbon tied around its stem. Eleanor stood there looking at it. In the daylight, it looked even more out of place, a bright splash of color in her monochrome house. She reached for it. Her fingers touched the smooth fabric. Just untie it, she thought. Put things back the way they were. But her hand hovered there, not pulling, not untying. Finally, she let her hand drop. Ridiculous, she muttered. It's just a ribbon. But she left it there. The day stretched out ahead of her, long and empty the way all her days were. Christmas Day. Everyone in Maple Ridge would be celebrating with family, opening presents, eating big meals. Eleanor had nowhere to be, nothing to do. She should clean the house, or read, or do one of the 1,000 small tasks she'd invented to fill her time. Instead, she found herself pulling on her coat. Just checking the snow, she told the empty house. Just seeing how much fell. She stepped outside. The cold hit her immediately, but the sun was bright, making the new snow sparkle like diamonds. The street was quiet, everyone inside with their families. Eleanor started walking, not toward town, toward the other end of Willow Creek Road, toward the brick house with the green door. She told herself she was just taking a walk, getting some air. The doctor had said she should move more, get more exercise. This had nothing to do with Grace and Lily. Nothing at all. But when she reached the brick house, she slowed, stopped at the gate. Through the front window, she could see a Christmas tree, its lights blinking. She could hear voices inside, laughter. Eleanor stood there, her breath fogging in the cold air, feeling foolish. "What are you doing?" she asked herself. "Why are you here?" She was about to turn and leave when the front door opened. Lily came running out, still in her pajamas, no coat. "Mrs. Walker!" the girl called, her voice bright with surprise and delight. "You came." Eleanor froze. "I was just—" "Lily, get back inside before you freeze." Grace appeared in the doorway, then spotted Eleanor. Her face broke into a smile. "Mrs. Walker, hi." "I was just taking a walk," Eleanor said quickly, too quickly. "I didn't mean to." "Do you want to come in?" Grace asked. "I just made hot chocolate, and we have tons of cookies left, way more than Lily and I can eat." Eleanor should have said no, should have made an excuse and left. "I suppose I could," she heard herself say. "Just for a minute." Lily let out a little squeal of happiness and grabbed Eleanor's hand, actually grabbed it with her small, warm fingers, and pulled her toward the house. And Eleanor let herself be pulled. The visits became a pattern, not every day, but often enough that Eleanor stopped being surprised when she found herself walking to the brick house with the green door. Grace never made a big deal of it. She'd just smile and invite Eleanor in for coffee. Lily would show her drawings from school or tell elaborate stories about her day. Eleanor told herself she was just being polite, being neighborly. That's what people in small towns did, wasn't it? But the truth she wouldn't admit even to herself, was that the silence in her own house had started to feel unbearable. 3 weeks after Christmas, Eleanor showed up at Grace's door with a jar of homemade strawberry jam. "Made it 2 summers ago," she said gruffly, thrusting the jar at Grace. "Still good. You can't let jam go to waste." Grace took it carefully, like it was something precious. "Thank you. This is so thoughtful." "It's just jam." But the next day, Grace showed up at Eleanor's door with fresh bread from the new bakery she was trying to get off the ground. "For the jam," she said simply. It became a kind of exchange, a language of small gifts. Eleanor brought vegetables from her freezer. Grace brought cookies. Lily made Eleanor a drawing of the two of them having tea, which Eleanor pretended not to care about, but secretly kept in her kitchen drawer. On a Tuesday evening in mid-January, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in years. She lit the fireplace in the middle of the day. Not because she was cold, because Grace and Lily were coming over. When they arrived, Lily noticed immediately. "You made a fire," she said, delighted. "It's so cozy." Eleanor busied herself with the tea things, uncomfortable with the attention. House was cold, but it wasn't cold, and they all knew it. They sat around the fire that evening, the three of them, drinking tea and eating the cookies Grace had brought. The conversation drifted lazily. Talk of the weather, of Lily's school, of the bakery Grace was trying to get customers for. It was ordinary, mundane. It was the best evening Eleanor had had in 15 years. At one point, Lily got up and wandered around the room, the way curious children do. She looked at the books on the shelf, the clock on the wall, the mantel above the fireplace, and then her eyes landed on the picture frame, still face down on the wood. "Why is this picture upside down?" Lily asked. The room went very quiet. Eleanor's hands tightened around her teacup. "That's private." "Lily," Grace said gently, "come sit down, honey." But Lily was still looking at the frame, her young face serious. "Don't you want to see the picture?" "No," Eleanor said sharply. "I don't." Lily nodded slowly, then came back to the sofa. But Eleanor could feel Grace watching her, could sense the question in her careful silence. After Lily had fallen asleep on the sofa, curled up with a blanket, Grace spoke quietly. "You don't have to tell me," she said, "but if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." Eleanor looked at the sleeping child, at Grace's kind face, at the fire burning warm in the fireplace, and something inside her shifted. "My husband and son," she said quietly. Her voice was rough, unused to speaking about this. "That's who's in the picture." Grace waited, didn't push, just waited. "My husband Henry died 15 years ago," Eleanor continued. "Car accident. My son Daniel survived, but—" She paused, her throat tight. "He blamed me. He was probably right to. Mrs. Walker, we fought that night about them going out in bad weather. I said terrible things. I was angry and scared, and I said things I shouldn't have. They went anyway, and Henry died because of it." Eleanor's hands were shaking. She set down her teacup before she dropped it. "Daniel left a year later. Couldn't stand to look at me. I wrote him letters, so many letters. He wrote back at first, but then he stopped. The last letter I sent, he never answered, and I have one more I never sent. Still sitting in my desk drawer after all these years." Grace's eyes were wet. "Where is he now?" "Boston, I think. Last I heard, he was working in medical technology. But that was years ago. I don't know if he's still there, don't know if he's married, don't know if I have grandchildren, don't know anything." "Have you tried to find him?" Eleanor shook her head. "What would I say? Sorry I killed your father. Sorry I drove you away? Some things can't be fixed, Grace." "But some things can." Eleanor looked at her. "You don't understand." "I do, actually." Grace's voice was soft but firm. "My mother cut me off when I got pregnant with Lily. Told me I was ruining my life. Told me not to come back until I fixed things." Eleanor stared at her. "I haven't spoken to her in 8 years," Grace continued. 8 years of wondering if she thinks about me, if she regrets what she said, if she ever wants to reach out but doesn't know how. That's different, is it? We're both stuck in silence because we're too afraid to make the first move, because we think we don't deserve forgiveness. Grace leaned forward. "But what if we're wrong? What if they're waiting for us to reach out?" Eleanor couldn't speak. Her chest felt tight. Grace stood, gently lifting Lily into her arms. The girl stirred but didn't wake. "Think about it," Grace said softly. "That's all. Just think about it." After they left, Eleanor sat alone in front of the dying fire. Finally, she stood and walked to the mantel. She picked up the picture frame, and slowly, carefully, she turned it over. The photo showed a younger Eleanor, smiling, standing between a tall man with kind eyes and a teenage boy with her same sharp chin. They were standing in front of a Christmas tree, the three of them, a family. Eleanor's fingers traced the glass over her son's face. "Danny," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." The fire crackled, the clock ticked, and Eleanor cried for the first time in 15 years. That night, after putting Lily to bed, Grace sat at her laptop in the small kitchen of their brick house. She couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor's face when she talked about Daniel, the raw grief, the guilt, the longing. Grace knew that look. She saw it in her own mirror sometimes when she let herself think about her mother. She opened a new browser tab and hesitated. This is none of your business, she told herself. Eleanor didn't ask for help. But Grace also knew something Eleanor didn't seem to. Sometimes the person who needed to make the first move was the one who couldn't. Sometimes you needed someone on the outside to knock on the door. She typed Daniel Walker, Boston Medical Technology. The results populated immediately. The first hit was a company website, Northbridge Health Systems. CEO, Daniel Walker. Grace clicked on his bio. A professional photo appeared. A man in his late 30s, dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples, serious eyes, a slight smile. He looked like Eleanor, same sharp chin, same intelligent eyes. The bio said he was originally from Maine, from Maple Ridge. It was him. Grace scrolled down, found a contact button, clicked it. A form appeared for media inquiries and business development. Not good enough. She kept searching, found his company's annual report, scanned the leadership team section. There. A direct email address, probably for investor relations, but still accessible. Grace opened a new email and stared at the blank screen. What was she doing? This was crazy. She'd known Eleanor for less than a month. This was deeply personal, private. But she thought about Lily sleeping in the next room, about how Grace would feel if 8 years turned into 15, into 20, into the rest of her life. She thought about Eleanor sitting alone in that dark house every Christmas. She started typing. Subject, a message about your mother. Dear Mr. Walker, my name is Grace Miller. You don't know me. I'm a neighbor of your mother's in Maple Ridge. I don't know if this is appropriate, and I apologize if I'm overstepping, but I felt like you should know some things. Your mother still lives in the house on Willow Creek Road. She's alone. She's been alone for 15 years. She talks about you. Not often and not easily, but she does. She told me about the accident, about the fight, about the letters she sent that you stopped answering. She told me about one more letter, one she never sent, one that's been sitting in her desk drawer for years because she doesn't think she has the right to send it. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty. I don't know what happened between you. I don't know your side of the story. And I'm not trying to interfere in something that's not my business. But I am a single mother who hasn't spoken to her own mother in 8 years. And I know what regret looks like. I see it in your mother's face every day. I just thought you should know that she's still there, that she still thinks about you, that she has things she wants to say but doesn't think she deserves to say them. You can choose what to do with this information, or you can choose to do nothing. That's completely your right, but you should know you have the choice. Sincerely, Grace Miller. She read it over 3 times, deleted whole paragraphs, added them back, changed wording. Finally, her cursor hovered over the send button. This is insane, she thought. You're going to ruin everything. Eleanor will hate you. Daniel will ignore you. This will accomplish nothing except making you feel like you did something. But she thought about Eleanor's face when she'd said, "Some things can't be fixed." Grace clicked send. The email whooshed away. For a long moment, Grace just sat there, staring at the message sent confirmation. Then she closed the laptop, went to bed, and lay awake for hours, wondering what she'd just done. 3 days passed. Grace checked her email obsessively. Morning, noon, night, nothing. Eleanor came over twice. Grace said nothing about the email. What was there to say? I contacted your estranged son without permission. That would go over well. She started to think maybe it was for the best that Daniel hadn't responded. Maybe it was a sign she should mind her own business. Stay out of other people's family drama. On the 4th morning, Grace woke up to find 17 new emails in her inbox. Spam, work schedules, a reminder about Lily's parent-teacher conference, and one from D. Walker at northbridgehealth.com. Grace's heart stopped. She sat up in bed, laptop balanced on her knees, and clicked on the email with shaking hands. From Daniel Walker. Subject, a message about your mother. Ms. Miller, I received your email 3 days ago. I've been trying to decide how to respond, or if I should respond at all. I'll be honest, my first reaction was anger. This is private. This is painful. This is family business, and you're a stranger. But I've read your email maybe 20 times in the past 3 days, and I can't stop thinking about it. You said my mother still talks about me. Is that true? After 15 years of silence, she still talks about me? I got her letters. All of them. Every single one. I kept them in a box in the back of my closet. I read the first dozen. Then I stopped reading them because it hurt too much. because I was still so angry. I told myself she should have tried harder 15 years ago when it mattered, when Dad had just died and I was 19 and falling apart. I told myself if she really loved me, she would have fought harder to keep me. But the truth is, I left. I chose to leave, and I chose not to come back. And I think about her all the time. I wonder if she's okay, if she's still in that house, if she's healthy, if she's lonely, if she ever thinks about me the way I think about her. I almost came back 6 times. I've driven to Maple Ridge probably 10 times in the past decade, always for work conferences or site visits in the area. I drive down Willow Creek Road. I slow down when I pass the house. I see the lights are always off. The yard is empty. The no visitors sign is still there. And I always keep driving. I tell myself she doesn't want to see me, that too much time has passed, that some wounds are too deep to heal. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm speaking at a medical technology conference at the Maple Ridge Lodge on January 28th. It's a Saturday. I was planning to fly in that morning and leave that night, but I could stay. I could extend my trip. If she wants to see me, if she really wants to see me, not out of obligation or pity, but because she actually wants to, I'll be at the lodge bar at 7 p.m. that night. I'll wait until 8 p.m. If she doesn't come, I'll understand. I'll leave and I won't bother her again. But if she does come, tell her I'm sorry too. Tell her I never stopped being her son, even when I was too angry to remember how. Thank you for reaching out. I think I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about this, but thank you. Daniel Walker. Grace read the email twice, then a third time. Then she called Eleanor. Can you come over? Her voice was shaking. Now, there's something I need to show you. Eleanor arrived 15 minutes later, her coat buttoned wrong, her face creased with worry. What's wrong? Is Lily okay? Lily's fine. Everyone's fine. Grace took a breath. But I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to be angry with me. Eleanor's expression shifted to wariness. What did you do? Grace handed her the laptop. I did something I had no right to do, and I'm sorry, but I need you to read this. Eleanor stared at the screen. As her eyes scanned the email, Grace watched her face change. Confusion, shock, anger, and then something else. Something that looked like hope mixed with terror. You contacted my son? Eleanor's voice was very quiet, dangerous. Yes. Without asking me? Yes. How dare you? Eleanor's hands were shaking. How dare you interfere in my life, in my family? You had no right. I know. This is private. This is... Eleanor's voice cracked. She stopped talking abruptly, pressing her lips together in a thin line. Grace waited. What if he only answered out of obligation? Eleanor whispered finally. What if he doesn't really want to see me? What if I go and he realizes he was right to leave? What if he's been waiting 15 years for permission to come home? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to decide right now. The conference is 2 weeks away. You have time. 2 weeks. Eleanor laughed, a harsh sound. 2 weeks to figure out how to face my son after 15 years. 2 weeks to figure out what to say to make up for... She stopped. Grace moved closer. You don't have to make up for anything. You just have to show up. What if I can't? Then he'll leave, and you'll go back to your quiet house, and nothing will change. Grace paused. But what if you can? Eleanor sank into a chair, still holding the laptop. She read the email again, and again. He kept my letters, she said softly. He kept them in a box. He did. He drives by the house. He does. He said... Eleanor's voice broke. He said he never stopped being my son. Grace knelt beside the chair and took Eleanor's hand. So show him you never stopped being his mother. Eleanor cried then, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from a place of grief she'd locked away for 15 years. Grace held her and let her cry. When the tears finally subsided, Eleanor looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I'm angry with you, she said. I know. You had no right. I know. But... Eleanor took a shaky breath. Thank you. Grace squeezed her hand. I don't know what to wear, Eleanor said suddenly. Is that stupid? After 15 years, I'm worried about what to wear. It's not stupid. I don't even know if I can walk into that bar. My legs might not work. Then I'll come with you. I'll drive you there. I'll sit in the parking lot if you need me to. Eleanor looked at her, really looked at her. Why are you doing this? Because someone needed to knock on the door, Grace said simply. And I happened to be here. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Eleanor's life. She changed her outfit 5 times a day, trying on clothes she hadn't worn in years. Nothing looking right. Everything made her look too old, too tired, too much like someone who'd given up on life. She cleaned her house obsessively, even though Daniel wasn't coming there. She polished floors that were already spotless. She reorganized cabinets. She scrubbed grout with a toothbrush. Grace came over every afternoon after her shift at the hospital. Sometimes she brought Lily. Sometimes she came alone. You don't have to have it all figured out, she kept saying. You just have to show up. What if I forget what to say? Eleanor asked for the 100th time. What if I just stand there like an idiot? Then you stand there like an idiot. He'll probably do the same thing. You'll both be idiots together. Despite herself, Eleanor smiled. Lily made Eleanor a card. It showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a Christmas tree. For when you see Danny, she'd written at the top in careful letters. Eleanor kept it in her coat pocket, touching it like a talisman whenever her courage faltered. The night before the meeting, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She paced her bedroom for hours, rehearsing what she'd say. Danny, I'm sorry. No, too simple. Danny, I never stopped thinking about you. Too dramatic. Danny, What? What could she possibly say that would make up for 15 years? At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep. She went downstairs and sat in her living room, staring at the pink ribbon still tied to the fake plant. This is stupid, she whispered to the empty room. I'm 74 years old. Too old to fix this. Too old to start over. But even as she said it, she knew she was going to try. Because Grace was right. Some things might not be fixable, but she'd never know unless she showed up. The next day arrived gray and cold. Eleanor put on her blue sweater. The one Daniel had always said brought out her eyes. She brushed her hair 3 times, put on lipstick, then wiped it off, then put it on again. Grace arrived at 6:30 to drive her. You look beautiful, Grace said. I look old. You look like his mother. That's all that matters. The drive to the Maple Ridge Lodge took 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. When they pulled into the parking lot, Eleanor saw the building through the windshield and her chest tightened. I can't do this. Yes, you can. My hands won't stop shaking. That's okay. His probably won't either. Grace? He's been waiting 15 years, Eleanor. He can wait another minute while you catch your breath. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Grace reached over and took her hand, squeezed it. You've got this, she said softly. Eleanor nodded. She didn't believe it, but she opened the car door anyway. The cold air hit her like a wall. She stood on shaking legs, looking at the lodge entrance. Do you want me to come in? Grace asked. Eleanor looked back at her, thought about saying yes, thought about having someone there to hold her up if she fell, but this was something she had to do alone. No, she said, this is mine. She turned and walked toward the entrance. Each step felt impossible. Her legs were lead, her chest was too tight to breathe, but she kept walking. She reached the door, put her hand on the handle, paused. He might not be there, she thought. He might have changed his mind. Only one way to find out. She pulled open the door. Warmth washed over her as she stepped inside. The lodge lobby was decorated for the holidays. Garland wrapped around banisters, a tree in the corner, the smell of pine and cinnamon. To her left, through an archway, was the bar. Eleanor's feet moved without her permission, carrying her toward it. The bar was quiet. A few people sat at tables, talking in low voices. Soft music played from hidden speakers. And there, sitting on a stool at the bar itself, his back to the door, was a man in a dark blue sweater. Sir. Eleanor's heart stopped. She knew that posture, those shoulders, the way he held his head. As if sensing her presence, the man turned. Their eyes met. He looked so much like Henry, the same dark eyes, the same strong jaw. But he had her nose, her mouth. He was older than the boy in the photograph upstairs. Gray touched his temples, lines creased his forehead, but he was her son. Mom, his voice cracked on the word. Danny. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across 10 feet of space, across 15 years of silence. I wasn't sure you'd come, Daniel said finally. I wasn't sure you'd be here. I've been here since 6:30. Something broke in Eleanor's chest. All her rehearsed speeches vanished. All her carefully planned words disappeared. She crossed the space between them in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around her son. He was taller than she remembered, broader, but when his arms came around her, hesitant at first, then tighter, he felt exactly the same. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "I know," Daniel said, his voice thick. "Me too, Mom. Me too." They stood there for a long time, holding on while the world moved around them, and neither of them noticed. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears streaming down their faces. They sat at a corner table, away from other people. A waitress brought coffee. Neither of them touched it. "You look good," Eleanor said because she didn't know how to start. "You look the same," Daniel said, then softer. "That's not true. You look tired." "I am tired. I'm sorry. I should have come back sooner." "No." Eleanor shook her head. "I should have fought harder to keep you. I should have." "Mom." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Can I say something?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I've spent 15 years working in healthcare," he began. "I've seen hundreds of families torn apart by tragedy, by illness, by accidents. And you know what I've learned?" Eleanor waited. "Blame doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't heal anything. It just keeps everyone frozen in place." He squeezed her hand. "Dad died because of ice and bad timing and bad luck, not because of you. But the fight was just a fight. Families fight. It doesn't mean—" His voice cracked. "It doesn't mean you killed him, Mom. And I'm sorry I ever made you think that." Eleanor couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face. "I read all your letters," Daniel continued. "I kept them in a box. I still have them. I read the first dozen when they came. Then I stopped because it hurt too much. But I never threw them away." "I have one more," Eleanor managed. "One I never sent. Can I hear it now?" With shaking hands, Eleanor pulled the folded letter from her purse. The paper was yellowed, soft from being folded and unfolded countless times. She unfolded it carefully. "Dear Danny," she read aloud, her voice breaking. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if I'll ever send it, but I need to say it anyway." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you needed that night. I'm sorry I let fear and anger speak louder than love. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to choose between staying with me and being loyal to your father's memory." Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the paper. "But most of all, I'm sorry I didn't tell you every single day that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. That watching you grow up was the greatest privilege of my life. That even now, sitting alone in this empty house, I set out 2 plates at dinner because some part of me still believes you might walk through that door." She couldn't continue. The words blurred on the page. Daniel's face was wet with tears. "I drove by the house," he said quietly, "more times than I can count. Every time I was in Maine for work. I'd drive down Willow Creek Road, slow down when I passed. See the lights were always off. See the no visitors sign. You did. Every time. And every time I told myself you'd moved on. That you didn't need me anymore. That I'd been gone too long. I never moved on. Neither did I." He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I stopped answering your letters. I'm sorry I let 15 years go by. We both let them go by." They sat in silence for a moment, holding hands across the table. 15 years of grief and guilt and longing hanging in the air between them. "I'm staying in town for a while," Daniel said finally. "A few weeks at least, maybe longer. I can work remotely." Eleanor looked up, hope flickering dangerously in her chest. "Really?" "Yeah." He smiled, a small, tentative smile that looked just like his father's. "I think it's time I came home." Daniel kept his word. He checked out of the Maple Ridge Lodge the next day and moved into a small rental house on Oak Street. He set up his laptop on the kitchen table and told his team he'd be working remotely for the foreseeable future. At first, the visits were awkward. Too much history, too many apologies, too much ground to cover. But slowly, so slowly, they found their way back to each other. Daniel came to Eleanor's house 3 times a week. They'd sit in the living room with the fire going, drinking tea, talking about small things. His work, her garden, the weather. They didn't rush. They both understood this would take time. Daniel fixed the broken gutter Eleanor had been meaning to repair for 3 years. Eleanor made him pot roast, exactly the way he'd loved it as a teenager. He ate 3 servings and took the leftovers home. And naturally, inevitably, Daniel met Grace and Lily. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Eleanor had invited him over for lunch, forgetting that Grace and Lily usually stopped by around noon. When the knock came, Eleanor tensed. "That's Grace," she said. "My neighbor. She's the one who found me," Daniel finished. "I know. I'd like to meet her." Grace and Lily came in, faces bright from the cold. Lily was chattering about something that had happened at school. Then she spotted Daniel and stopped mid-sentence. "Oh," she said. "Hello." "Lily, this is Daniel," Eleanor said. "My son." Lily's eyes went wide. "You're the one from the picture." Daniel smiled. "I am." "Did you come back?" "I did." "Good." Lily nodded seriously. "Your mom missed you a lot." "I missed her too." Grace stepped forward, offering her hand. "Mr. Walker, I'm Grace Miller." "Daniel, please." He shook her hand. "And I owe you. I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "You don't need to thank me," Grace said. "I just knocked on a door. You and Eleanor did the rest. That door changed my life." They all sat down for lunch. The 4 of them crowded around Eleanor's small kitchen table. Lily dominated the conversation, asking Daniel 1,000 questions about Boston, about his work, about everything. When Lily asked what he did for a living, Daniel tried to explain remote patient care technology in terms a 7-year-old could understand. "So, you help sick people without being in the same room?" Lily asked. "Exactly." "That's cool. My mom's a nurse. She helps people too." "I know. Your mom told me." Over the next few weeks, the 4 of them fell into an easy rhythm. Daniel would stop by Grace's new bakery, Harbor Light Bakery, in the mornings for coffee. He'd end up staying for an hour helping Lily with her homework at one of the small tables while Grace worked. In the evenings, they'd often end up at Eleanor's house. They'd cook dinner together, something Eleanor hadn't done in years. They'd eat by the fire. They'd talk and laugh, and slowly, piece by piece, become something like a family. One afternoon, Daniel was helping Grace move some heavy boxes in the bakery when he noticed a stack of past due notices on the counter. She tried to hide them, but he'd already seen. "Things tight?" he asked quietly when Lily was in the bathroom. Grace's cheeks flushed. "I'll figure it out. It's just taking longer than I expected to build a customer base. Maple Ridge is small, and there are already 2 other bakeries in town." "What if I told you my company does corporate catering contracts?" Daniel said. "We're always looking for local partners for conferences and events." Grace looked at him sharply. "I don't want charity, Daniel." "It's not charity. Your cookies are legitimately better than anything we've served at our last 5 conferences." He held up his hands. "I'm talking about a real business arrangement. You'd have to meet our standards, fill out paperwork, all of it. But if you're interested, I can send you the vendor application." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're a good baker, because your business could use the help, and because—" He paused. "Because you gave me my mother back. So if I can help you keep your bakery open, I'm going to." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." A week later, Harbor Light Bakery became an official vendor for Northbridge Health System's New England region. One evening in late February, Grace's phone rang while she was closing up the bakery. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then something, instinct maybe, or fate, made her pick up. "Grace?" The voice was older, hesitant, achingly familiar. Grace's breath stopped. "Mom, I saw an article," Diane Miller said. Her voice was shaking. "In the Portland Press Herald, about a new bakery in Maple Ridge making waves, Harbor Light. It mentioned the owner was a single mother from Boston who'd relocated. It had your name." Grace sat down hard in one of the bakery chairs. "I know I have no right to call," her mother continued. "No right to expect you to talk to me after 8 years. But Grace, honey, I've been thinking about you every single day. And when I saw that article, I hoped, maybe this was a sign. Maybe I should finally try." Grace couldn't speak. Her throat had closed. "I was wrong," Diane said. Her voice broke. 8 years ago, I was so wrong. You weren't making a mistake. You were making the best decision for yourself and your baby. And I should have supported you. I should have been there." You told me not to come back, Grace managed. I know, and I've regretted it every day since. I was scared and judgmental and horrible, and by the time I realized what I'd done, I was too ashamed to reach out. I kept thinking maybe next month, maybe next year, maybe when I figured out how to apologize properly. Grace was crying now. I have a daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 7 years old. Silence on the other end. Then, I have a granddaughter. Yes. What's she like? She's amazing, smart and funny and kind. Grace stopped. She doesn't know about you. I didn't know what to tell her. I understand. Diane's voice was thick. Grace, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I wanted you to know I love you. I've always loved you. Grace closed her eyes. She thought about Eleanor and Daniel, about 15 years of silence, about doors that stayed closed because no one had the courage to knock. She thought about all the times she'd wanted her mother to call, all the birthdays and holidays she'd spent alone, all the moments she'd wished she could share with someone who knew her, really knew her. I'd like you to meet her, Grace heard herself say. Lily, if you want to. Really? Diane's voice was full of hope and disbelief. Really, but... Grace paused. This is going to take time, Mom. We have a lot to work through. I can't just pretend the last 8 years didn't happen. I know. I don't expect you to. I'd like the chance to try. If you'll give it to me. Grace thought for a long moment. Come to the bakery. Next Saturday at 2 o'clock. We can talk. And if it goes well, you can meet Lily. I'll be there, Diane said immediately. Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. When Grace hung up, she found Eleanor standing in the bakery doorway. She'd let herself in with the spare key Grace had given her. You heard? Grace asked. Eleanor nodded. Second chances seem to be going around. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. What if it goes badly? What if she disappoints me again? Eleanor crossed the room and sat down across from Grace. What if it goes well? What if this is the beginning of getting your mother back? I'm terrified. Good, Eleanor said firmly. That means it matters. That means you still care. That's not something to be afraid of. Grace looked at her. When did you get so wise? Eleanor smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. When a stranger knocked on my door and wouldn't let me hide anymore. The following Saturday, Grace paced behind the bakery counter while Lily sat at a corner table, coloring contentedly. Mama, you're making me dizzy, Lily said without looking up. Sorry, baby. Who's coming? Grace had told Lily someone special was visiting, but hadn't explained who. You'll see when they get here. Is it a surprise? Sort of. At 2 o'clock exactly, the bell above the door chimed. A black woman in her 60s stepped inside. She wore a nice coat and nervous expression. Her hair was gray, her face lined, but her eyes were exactly like Grace's. Those eyes found Grace across the room and filled with tears. Hi, baby, Diane said softly. Grace couldn't move. She just stood there, frozen. Lily looked up from her coloring. She studied the woman with the frank curiosity of children. Are you my grandma? She asked. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Lily, really looked at her, and started crying. I hope so, she managed. Lily considered this. Then she got up, walked over, and held out her crayon. Do you want to color with me? I'm making a picture of our house. Diane looked at Grace, asking permission. Grace nodded, unable to speak. And just like that, 3 generations sat together at a bakery table, coloring in silence, learning how to be a family again. Spring came to Maple Ridge, then summer, then fall. Daniel extended his stay in town indefinitely. He set up a permanent office in Bangor, making the 30-minute commute 3 days a week and working from home the rest of the time. Home, he said one day, testing the word. I haven't called Maple Ridge home in 15 years. Does it feel like home now? Eleanor asked. He thought about it. Getting there. Harbor Light Bakery thrived. Grace hired 2 employees to help with the increased business from Northbridge Health Systems contracts. Diane came to town every weekend, staying in the small apartment above the bakery that Grace had converted into a guest room. Slowly, carefully, Grace and her mother rebuilt their relationship. It wasn't easy. There were tears, arguments, moments when old wounds reopened. But they kept showing up, kept trying. One evening in October, Daniel showed up at Grace's door holding a bouquet of flowers. These are for you, he said, suddenly awkward. Grace blinked. Daniel, I'd like to take you to dinner, If you're interested, there's this new Italian place in Bangor that just opened, and I thought—" He stopped. "I'm doing this badly," Grace smiled. "Are you asking me on a date?" "Yes, is that okay?" From inside, Lily's voice called out, "Say yes, Mama!" They both laughed. "Yes," Grace said. "I'd like that." Eleanor watched their relationship develop with something between happiness and amusement. When Daniel asked for her blessing to propose, 6 months later, on a cold March evening, she cried and said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small, just family and a handful of close friends, held at St. Michael's Church on the hill. Lily was the flower girl, wearing a pink dress with a ribbon in her hair. Diane cried through the entire ceremony. Eleanor sat in the front row, holding a tissue, watching her son marry a woman she'd come to love like a daughter. After the ceremony, Lily ran up to Eleanor. "We're really a family now," she announced. Eleanor pulled the girl into a hug. "We've been a family for a while now, sweetheart." "I know, but now it's official." That night, at the small reception at the Maple Ridge Lodge, Daniel raised his glass for a toast. 2 years ago," he said, "I was living in Boston, successful by most measures, but I was also alone, disconnected from the person who mattered most." He looked at Eleanor. "Then a stranger knocked on my mother's door, and that knock, that simple act of reaching out, started a chain reaction that brought me home." He turned to Grace. "And brought me to you." "To knocking on doors." Grace raised her glass. "And to the people brave enough to answer." Everyone drank. Later, Eleanor found herself on the lodge's back porch, looking out at the snow-covered town. Maple Ridge glowed softly under streetlights, every house warm with light. Grace joined her, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. "Thank you," Eleanor said quietly. "For what?" "For knocking, for not giving up when I tried to send you away, for believing things could be different." Grace slipped her arm through Eleanor's. "You would have done the same for me. Actually, you did do the same for me. You encouraged me to give my mother another chance. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two stubborn women who didn't know when to quit. The best kind of women." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the town sleep. Christmas came again, the third since Lily had knocked on Eleanor's door with a tin of cookies. Eleanor's house was transformed. Lights wrapped around the porch railings. A wreath hung on the door. Inside, a Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, decorated with ornaments both new and old. And at the top of that tree, preserved in a clear glass ornament, was Lily's pink ribbon. The house was full of noise, the good kind. Lily chasing Daniel through the rooms, both of them laughing. Grace and Diane in the kitchen, working together on Christmas dinner. The smell of roasting turkey and fresh rolls. Eleanor stood in her living room, taking it all in. "Overwhelmed?" Daniel asked, coming to stand beside her. "In the best way." He put his arm around her shoulders. "I'm glad I came home, Mom." "Me too, Danny. Me too." Dinner was chaotic and perfect. They crowded around Eleanor's dining room table. Too many people for the space, but no one cared. They passed dishes and told stories and laughed until their sides hurt. After dinner, they gathered around the fireplace. Lily, as always, wanted to hear the story. "Tell about the night we knocked on your door, Grandma Eleanor," she demanded. Eleanor settled into her armchair, Lily curled up beside her. "Well," she began, "it was Christmas Eve. The house was dark and cold. I was sitting alone thinking this was just another holiday to survive. And then," Lily prompted, even though she'd heard the story 100 times, "and then there was a knock at my door. 3 little knocks that changed everything." Lily nodded seriously. "Because I had cookies and a ribbon. You did, and you saw a sad old lady in a dark house, and you decided to leave something bright behind. The pink ribbon." "The pink ribbon," Eleanor agreed. She reached over and touched the glass ornament on the tree. "You tied it to my plant and told me my house needed something happy." "Did it work?" Eleanor looked around the room, at Daniel sitting with his arm around Grace, at Diane smiling contentedly, at Lily, her eyes bright with love and mischief. "Yes, sweetheart, it worked." "Because now you're not alone anymore," Lily said. "No, now I have a family." "The best family," Lily declared. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed in various rooms around the house, Eleanor stood alone in the living room. The fire had burned down to embers. The Christmas tree lights blinked softly. She walked to the tree and looked at the pink ribbon in its glass ornament. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for knocking." Because some doors stay closed until someone is brave enough to knock, and some lives stay frozen until someone reminds you what warmth feels like. Eleanor had spent 15 years in darkness, convinced she deserved it, convinced isolation was safer than connection, convinced the silence was peace rather than punishment. Then a young mother and a little girl knocked on her door on a snowy Christmas Eve, and everything changed. Not all at once, not easily, but completely. Because that's the thing about second chances. They don't announce themselves with trumpets and fanfare. They arrive quietly, carrying a tin of cookies and wearing a pink ribbon. All you have to do is be brave enough to open the door and let the light back in.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.